That's post-World War II. The third would be demand for dignity and respect. That's the 1950s, 1960s. Number four, we'll talk about racial turmoil, the late 60s and early 1970s. And the fifth era I call being in the room, and that's contemporary times. So again, and what Melvin just mentioned in regards to the book will be included. Now, as I said, I will attempt to categorize each of these eras from actually the early 20th century, the turn of the century, to current times. Now, before I disseminate, this significant and important information about historical evolution of African Americans' participation in organized sports, let's always remember that from the turn of the century almost to present, there was a parallel in playing a game fairly and being inside a country that had unequal rights and systemic racial segregation. So there's a real dichotomy there, being fair and being unequal. Consequently, Black athletes paid a price. They paid a price both literally and figuratively when their outspoken actions and responses fell into the realm of politics and civil disobedience with a backdrop of Jim Crow laws, lynchings, and racial inequities. Let's go back just a year ago. As some of you may recall, Fox journalist, what's her name, Laura Ingraham, I believe, called Kevin Durant and LeBron James ignorant and advised them to, quote unquote, shut up and dribble. These racist comments verbalized by this journalist are many times the hidden thoughts of white Americans when Black athletes voiced their displeasure of resistance toward racist sentiments designed to destroy people of color by any means necessary. I will verify these words through my own outspoken athletic experience during the late 1960s. But nevertheless, with that, let me just talk about the first era of sports activism. And again, I've labeled that first era allowance to participate, the turn of the 20th century to World War II. I always say, they say break the ceiling or break the glass ceiling. And I feel that the beginning of the 20th century, white folks allowed African-American athletes to begin competing in some sports, from about 1900 to 1945. Traditionally, Black athletes were thought of as, in this racist society, as being incapable, and participation was limited because of their mental, physical, and economical shortcomings, or so-called being inferior. And I'm pulling out a quote from Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, and it says here, political discourse has usually reinforced prevailing stereotypes of a lazy, inferior group getting undeserved handouts and scapegoating that makes the formal barriers all the more unjust and the resentments of white working class citizens all the more tragic. So, I say that just to reiterate that stereotype of inferiority. Now, during that era of 1900, 1945, I'm going to just highlight some athletes that were sports activists. Jack Johnson, nicknamed the Galveston Giant, was a professional boxer in the heart of the Jim Crow era. Remember, the Jim Crow era was a collection of state and local statutes that legalized segregation from 1865 to 1970, and I say around Richmond, even longer than 1970. But Jack Johnson was married to a white woman and was obviously involved in that miscegenation laws, which didn't allow interracial marriage. But Jack Johnson beat a Canadian named Tommy Burns in Australia for the heavyweight championship in 1908. Jesse Owens attended Ohio State University and was a four-time gold medalist at the 1936 Summer Olympic Games in Germany. And he made and earned those 4 gold medalists as he was witnessed by Adolf Hitler in the Third Reich. Joe Louis beat Max Melling, another German, pre-World War, to win the world title boxing, and that was a rematch in 1938. And Paul Robeson was the first Black All-American football player from Rutgers College, Rutgers University now, in 1919. Now, you know that he was an author, a singer, and and a actor and a political activist. And I like to say, "Oh man, river, he just keeps rolling." And that was Paul. And also Paul was on the J. Edgar FBI list, as I was in my day, and I'll explain more about that. But he was on the list being a revolutionary and a subversive individual. So my point with that particular allowance to participate, it's interesting that all of these athletes, and there's many more athletes, I'm highlighting those, and they sacrificed, but they received acclaim internationally before they received acclaim nationally. All these athletes, and they had a history of being the best while they were inside this country, but they did not get the acclaim or the recognition until they left the country and competed outside. So let's be mindful of that. Also, at the turn of the century, let me not miss the Black jockeys that happened during the turn of the century. At one time, in 1875, 13 of the 15 jockeys that rode in the Kentucky Derby were Black men. And in 1901 and 1902, Jimmy Wingfield won the Kentucky Derby. He won them in 1901 and 1902. So leaving that era, I'm going to era 2, which is the struggle for access, or the post-World War II era. And at that time, we can talk about Jackie Robinson, who was raised in California, played tennis, football, track, and played baseball, of course, in high school. He attended UCLA and played football, track, and baseball. But in 1947, he had his major league debut with the LA Dodgers. Earl Floyd, raised in Virginia, graduated from West Virginia State University, CIAA, hooray. Was a 2-time All-American in basketball. Lloyd was the first African-American to play in the NBA. And he played on Halloween Day, October 31st, 1950, for the Washington Capitals. Now, in the NFL, before the Jackie Robinson arrival, there were a few African-Americans that christened the NFL: Marion Motley, Woody Strode, who was an actor also, Kenny Washington, and Bill Willis. Jump into the era 3, and I call era 3 demand for dignity and respect, and that was the 1950s and 60s. I start out with Arthur Ashe, and we all know, if you're from Richmond, that they renamed the Arthur Ashe, they renamed the boulevard Arthur Ashe Boulevard, and I have some issues with that because they named Arthur Ashe Boulevard after his father, not Arthur Ashe. Because Arthur Ashe is Arthur Ashe Jr. So I confronted the city with that, and to no avail, but just be mindful that Arthur Ashe, renaming Arthur Ashe Boulevard, is named after his father, not Arthur Ashe. But Arthur Ashe was a Richmond native, as you know, a tennis professional champion, graduated from UCLA, and was the first African-American male to win Wimbledon in 1975, US Open in 1968, Australian Open 1970, and was selected to the Davis Cup 4 years, 63, 1968, 69, and 70. Althea Gibson attended Florida A&M University. She was the first African-American allowed to participate in the U.S. Tennis Championship and won the French Open in 56, Wimbledon in 57 and 58, U.S. Open in 1957, 58, and she was also a professional golfer. So I'm just, again, highlighting a few of those great athletes in that era that were African-American, but that also, dealt with activism. I look at Curt Flood. Now, Curt Flood was a baseball player, a professional baseball player in 1969, and he battled what they call a reserve clause. And the reserve clause was kind of an unfair kept, and it allowed players, or it kept players beholding for life to teams which they originally signed, even though they satisfied the terms and conditions of those contracts. So Curt Flood fought that. Curt Flood lost in court, by the way, but eventually his particular cause was won. And today we have free agency in professional sports. Now, I just feel that all the athletes in professional sports just needed to compensate Curt Flood for his sacrifices. And again, when you deal with sports activism, you deal with sacrifice. Also in that era, we know Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who demonstrated with gloves in their hand, on one hand, in the 1968 Mexico City Olympics during the national anthem. And of course, Muhammad Ali, who they took Muhammad Ali's boxing career temporarily from 1966 to 1971 because he refused induction into the military due to his religion. Now, I'm just going to little augment on Muhammad Ali, and everybody knows Muhammad Ali's history, but one thing you have to realize about Muhammad Ali, most African Americans during that time found contact with Muhammad Ali. You could, at one point, you're going to run into Muhammad Ali. He ran around the country and ran around the world and was very, very accessible. I ran into him in Owego, New York, when he was speaking, and he pulled all the little black boys into a room and asked us to just think about different leadership characteristics. He talked about confidence, being courageous, being creative, being honest. He just went through a potpourri of characteristics in regards to leadership that he wanted us to try to adhere to. But there's two stories I like about Muhammad Ali during that time. Muhammad Ali, and I was at this fight, 1972, he fought Floyd Patterson. And everyone thought he and Floyd Patterson had issues, but of course that's marketing and boxing. But in 1972, Floyd Patterson had IRS tax problems. So Muhammad Ali fought Floyd Patterson to help him with his tax debt. Also, the great Ernie Shavers, who was a heavyweight boxer in 1977. And Ernie was known as one of the hardest hitting heavyweight punchers of all time, even today. And I remember in a press conference, they asked Muhammad Ali, why are you fighting Ernie Shavers? He's the hardest hitting heavyweight of all time. And Muhammad Ali responded, because he has 6 kids. And that was very touching to me because Muhammad Ali was trying to help Ernie Shavers and support his family. And I think Ernie Shavers received the highest purse that he ever had, about $300,000. So that's Ernie Shavers, and that's Muhammad Ali. So I just, little sidebar. The fourth era I call racial turmoil. Now, and this was 1968 and through 1972, and I sort of get involved with with my my story, but I just want to do a little regurgitation of what was happening in the late 60s and early 70s. You know, you hear about Kent State, Woodstock, Vietnam, Martin Luther King, John and Bobby Kennedy, LBJ, again, Muhammad Ali, just the times, the political and cultural changes that were happening at that particular time were really great. But I'm gonna try to focus on something that I really have been involved with a little bit, and this is there were about 150 college and university civil disobedience demonstrations that occurred in the United States at that time, the late 60s, early 70s, and unrest amongst the Black athletes was pretty widespread. I'm going to quickly share some of those revolts that generally emanated from confrontations between Black athletes and white coaches at predominantly white schools. University of Washington, Black player accused head coach of discrimination. University of Texas at El Paso, long jump champion Bob Beamon kicked off the team for protesting Mormons' treatments of Black. Princeton, player accused coach of racism. Wyoming, and you know about the University of Wyoming, some of you, and the Wyoming 14, when Coach Lloyd Eaton kicked off 14 players because they wanted to put a Black band around their arm to protest Brigham Young's treatment of Black. Indiana University, when the coach dismissed 14 players for their response to racial actions on campus. Buffalo State University basketball team member quits, charging athletic department with discrimination. University of Pittsburgh, Black athletes charged athletic department with discrimination. Oregon State athletic department charged in court racial discrimination. University of California, Black players claim racial discrimination by coaches. So I can go on, but just want to give you some type of idea of what we were talking about during those late 60s. Now, the last revolt that I'm going to mention here was one I participated in 1969, excuse me. And what I'm going to do is give you a little video now. Just be mindful that Syracuse is in the dark jerseys and Penn State, they're in the white jerseys, and it's a little video on the Syracuse 8. And of course, I make the first tackle of the game. I'm the left defensive end, so keep an eye out on that. Mel? Everybody enjoying this or what? Oh, she muted everybody. Can't hear it, Melvin.
Can you hear it now?
No, I can't.
So you have to go down to your microphone and press that little up arrow. And you get a range of things to choose. And I think.
Okay.
Same as system.
Okay, so sorry, hold on a moment. Okay, your screen sharing.
I ran into this the last time I tried to show a movie and I can't remember how I fixed it.
Okay, let's see. Stop video mute. Okay, I'm unmuted. You said go where now?
So
Yes.
the little up arrow beside the microphone.
Ah, okay. Speakers, things. Test speakers, switch audio settings. System. Let's try that.
There we go.
We'll try again. Let me know when you can hear it.
Well, we can't hear it.
Oh no. Oh dear. Let's see.
But that's all right. Well, we talked about this over and over.
Yeah, I didn't realize that the video and the sound were not together.
Well,
I can play it in the background. They can view it.
no, that doesn't work, Melvin.
Okay, I do apologize.
You can't get somebody to fix it.
Yeah, I can see if I can get someone to fix it, and then
But meanwhile, that sort of killed my drama.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But anyway, let me
So
do this. You know, this I will talk to you about exactly what I was mentioning in terms of my particular sports activism, and I was teamed with 9 other players in 1969, and we made a decision to boycott Syracuse University's football program. Why did we do that? In 1970, the racial tensions obviously boiled over all over the country, and more so, I feel, at Syracuse University. Now, realize that our coach was a man that was similar to Nick Saban at Alabama in terms of prestige within the NCAA athletic world. His name was Ben Sportswalter, and he was a 1959 National Football champion. And he was the coach that had Ernie Davis, the first African-American Heisman Trophy winner. So we were fighting or going uphill in terms of the type of racism that was within the athletic department that was pretty systemic. And athletic racism, systemic racism was all over the country. There were different rules that you had to abide by, and all the coaches knew this. A northern team going down south and playing Alabama and Georgia, and if a black fullback or a black back scored, there might be a riot. You couldn't have but so many black players on the field at one time. There was 2. There were a lot of different rules and regulations that even the older coaches know today that existed in regards to the systemic race policies and patterns within college sports. Well, it was difficult for me, and I show this was my family. This was my family in upstate New York. I grew up with white and black people. That's my sisters and brothers. Where am I? I'm right here. So I had a different background to a certain extent than most people, particularly those in this area, Richmond, because my wife, I talked to her about her education and athletic career, and she it's fraught with segregation. So my background was a little different. But coming back to Syracuse, we couldn't stomach the racial inequities at that time. So we decided to take a stand. And the stand was based on four demands. Our academic advising was done by our coaches. So they would try to keep you eligible to play versus matriculate to graduate. And I tricked them on that. That's a long story. I told the fellas, look, have them fill out your curriculum card and you fill it out in pencil. You have them sign it, have the coaches sign it, and then when you get it, erase it and put it in pen and go get registered. So that's what we did for the first year. After the first and second year, they didn't pay any attention. So that's how we beat that. But that was one of our demands. Second demand was we wanted some adequate medical treatment. And this is for all the players, not just Black, but white players. We had a doctor who was the head of the athletic program that was a gynecologist. Yes, that's right. He was a gynecologist. And so he knew nothing about medical treatment from an athletic and programmatic perspective, and he was also known to say he hated to touch Black people. That was a quote. That was a quote unquote. So when I went there and saw him, I swore to myself, I will never, ever get hurt. So I never got hurt because I said, he will never touch me. And so the third demand that we wanted fair assignments on team positions or, playing in the game because again, these patterns of systemic racism in athletics were pretty prevalent and we knew that existed. And last but not least, we wanted some African Americans to be involved in the athletic department, and we wanted a coach, a Black coach. And Syracuse University never had any Blacks in their athletic department ever since its inception in 1970. And be mindful that Syracuse University, once it did start in 1970, it was about inclusion because it was started by abolitionists, and some of the first students to graduate were Blacks, Native American, and women at Syracuse University. That's right, back in the late 1800s. But that changed. Time went by. Melvin, you all right? What you gonna do? Melvin, oh, she can't. Okay.
Yeah, okay, let's try it again.
All right. No.
In 1969, 9 Black teammates, members of the Orange football squad of Syracuse University, made a life-changing decision. Together, this band of brothers decided to boycott the 1969-1970 football season, challenging the school they loved in a collective effort to demand changes and promote racial equality within the university football program. The Syracuse 8 is the long overdue story of that time, that decision, and how they, as young men, became change agents in the world of American university athletic programs. The setting is important. It was a time of cultural change in our country. Race inequality dominated the national news. Mistakenly called the Syracuse 8 by the media in 1970, the players actually numbered 9 and included Greg Allen, Richard Bulls, John Godbolt, Dana Harrell, John Loven, Clarence Bucky McGill, A. Alif Muhammad, Dwayne Walker, and Ron Womack. The players approached the coaching staff with 4 demands: access to the same academic tutoring made available to their white teammates, better medical care for all team members, starting assignments based on merit rather than race, and a challenge to integrate the coaching staff, which had been all white since 1898. Author David Marc chronicles this landmark time in Syracuse University's history in his latest book, Leveling the Playing Field, The Story of the Syracuse Eight. 35 years later, in 2006, the university exonerated the Syracuse Eight for their boycott and awarded each the Chancellor's Medal of Extraordinary Courage. In 2011, the university established the Syracuse 8 Scholarship, which is awarded annually to an African American or Latino first-year student who exhibited leadership skills and dedication to community service in high school. These young men made difficult choices on their journey to manhood, sacrificing college and potential pro football careers, opting instead for social justice, not just for themselves, but for future generations as well. The story lives on. The conversations about race, shifting cultural attitudes, choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, and bringing communities together to effect change. This is our story today.
All right, thank you, Melvin. That was right on time. Appreciate it. I wanted to, I guess that was all pretty well said, but I just wanted to also highlight that the Medal of Courage was also given to President Joe Biden. So I'm on a pretty good list with our current president. And I also want to give a shout out. I don't know if my 2 colleagues that were just presented are listening or watching, but Ron Womack, who was a close to a PhD at University of Minnesota, but he was from West Virginia, and he was one of the Syracuse 8, and Dana Harrell, who is an attorney, but he was from Indiana, and he was a quarterback, and Ron was a middle guard. So hopefully they're out there, but I wanted a quick shout out to them. But what all this leads to for me is from 50 or 60 years ago to last year, if you recall, the Pac-12 football players threatened a boycott unless demands were met. Other schools like Western Carolina, Oklahoma State University, UCLA, Kansas State University, Ithaca College, all these schools and more we're still having these same systemic, racial, horrible issues. Even you remember one of the most publicized confrontation in sports, in terms of sports activism, was at the University of Missouri in 2015, where that school made their president resign, and they also almost lost millions of dollars if they didn't play the game. You know, it's sort of, I think of Fannie Lou Hamer, the 1964 Mississippi voting and women's rights activist, who said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." So we seem to continue some of these issues, but it leads me to era number 5 and being in the room at the table, contemporary times. The full-blown curve of negative past historic racist actions in sports may be flattening a little bit. As I mentioned, the University of Missouri risked losing millions of dollars due to racial conflict on campus in 2005, or 2005, yeah. Today, athletes such as LeBron James, Chris Paul, Tiger Woods, Williams sisters, Colin Kaepernick, and many others are now what I call in the room. They are physically in the room, and via social media and other virtual tools, they are in the room also. They are now in decision-making positions. They're in the room shaping business policy related to their business interests. These big money Black players now have big money business leverage. I will close with the story. I think we're in the 45-minute range. I will close with the story involving Steph Curry of the NBA and Under Armour. Steph Curry is regarded as the best shooter in the NBA. That's bar none. And he is known as also Under Armour's highest profile endorsed player. Well, in 2017, Under Armour's chief operating officer and president, Patrick Frisk, made a controversial statement regarding business support policy by Donald Trump. Steph vehemently disagreed with this, and he was planning to leave the brand. The next day, Frisk purchased a full-page ad in the Baltimore newspaper trying to explain his error in his statement, and currently, I believe, obviously changed Steph's mind, because Steph is now continues that $20 million a year Under Armour contract until 2024. And so I call that truly Black power. And I think that is a major difference nowadays in comparing the past history, the turn of the 20th century, and this current contemporary time. So I'm gonna leave you with Jimmy Balvano's quote. He had two of them in the 1993 ESPY speech. He said, "What enables us to achieve our greatness contains seeds of our destruction." And his other quote, which is pretty popular, "Don't give up, don't ever give up." So with that, I thank you for your patience and time. Hope you learned something, and I will be taking questions according to Melvin.
Thank you so much. That was very enlightening. Learned a lot that I never knew. And I'm so grateful for you sharing this history and the 5 eras of sports activism with us. I have a question in the chat, and if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or you can ask them orally. First question is, what is your view on the current NFL controversy regarding the lack of diversity among coaches? That's the NFL controversy.
Well, in terms of the NFL, I think it's a positive situation that at least the NFL is addressing the subject. There are a lot of professional subject matter areas that aren't even addressing the subject. So I believe that the NFL has committed themselves to attempt trying to recruit Black head coaches that are Black. And it's all about recruitment. So I don't have any really major issues with that. My major issues are the other areas of the athletic syndrome, if you will, the owners, the head of the medical departments. It's a matter of recruitment. You can find the people, but you have to have some focused recruitment to find out where the people of color are and to go get them. Howard University has a medical school. You could go get, and they have a medical alumni list. And these folks are pretty good because I know some of them over the years. So it's just a matter of your commitment. But with the NFL, I think there is obviously a commitment to get more Black head coaches and Latino head coaches. It's just a matter of that's going to happen, and that will happen.
Thank you. Christopher, did you have a question?
I did. I just muted myself again. So, Clarence, when I was an English professor, I never let a student finish a proposal paper without a clear action statement. So that's my question for you. What can we do? What would you have us do to just help further change in these times? I mean, if we're going to do one thing, what would it be?
Well, you know, I look at things globally and then I look at them locally. And, you know, from a global perspective, you know, I think about apartheid and Arthur Ashe and how people changed apartheid by saying, we're going to boycott particular products and we're going to boycott particular brands if things aren't changed. And things changed quickly when masses of people said they're not going to buy certain products. In regards to your Chris, your question specifically, one thing that I see that, and I see this in Richmond, I don't know if this is happening all over the country, but I would like to see, or would like to see this continue, that we are reading Black authors and Black experiences and in-depth pieces that deal with systemic racism and inequality. And we are getting a real bird's eye view from different authors of the perceptions and facts and realities that systemic racism has done and continues to do. So I would hope that, you know, our white brothers and sisters continue to read and continue to get more historical information, but also be vocal in their exploits to deal with fighting these racist tendencies. You know, I grew up in upstate New York, and I didn't really realize how racist the country was because, you know, I was an athlete, I was a pretty good student, I was elected to our student council, and there was only about 15 Blacks in the school, or about 1,500 whites, and we were pretty accepted. You know, there wasn't a racial situation that I saw. My brother and sister said there was, because they were older, but I didn't. But once I went to Syracuse, I was confronted with racism. So I guess what I'm saying, Chris, is, you know, confront your family members. You know, everybody has family members that are saying the N-word, or somebody down the line somewhere is saying it and being, you know, very negative and venomous when it's dealing with people of color. So I would say, Chris, in terms of your, you know, personal world, you know, deal with those particular confrontations the best way you can. I'm not saying get in a fight and end up getting shot, but I'm also saying, you know, we have
my family, don't you?
Yeah, but we have to change the world, you know, a bite at a time, in terms of our own, you know, local sphere. But again, from an international, national sphere, I would like to see, you know, people as a group say, hey, if I have a problem with Under Armour, let's as a group boycott Under Armour for a month. Guess what? Under Armour will have a Black CEO if we if the Black community boycotted Under Armour, or any other. We could boycott Target. But I'm just saying that there has to be a strategy and a plan to try to you know, just address certain things.
Right. I want to second your shout out to Cass too. Though I'm a little over halfway through that book, and years ago when it first came out, I read The Warmth of Other Suns, also by Isabel Wilkerson. And so both of those are really good books. If anybody's looking for a good read, good place to start.
Thanks, Christopher. Speaking of good reads, coming to the table, RVA has a list of great reads, and we're looking forward to expanding that. And in terms of having those difficult conversations with your family members and friends, if you need practice or want someone to give you a little more guidance, visit Coming to the Table, RVA. We meet virtually on Zoom now, and we have a question from one of our leaders in Coming to the Table, which is, what about the graduation rates of college athletes? Should more be done to make sure these athletes actually graduate? Clarence?
Yeah, I think more should be done. Syracuse University did not allow their student athletes to fail. If in fact we did not meet our academic standards, we could not keep our scholarship, nor could we obviously play the game that we had scholarships for. And in the day I was there, it was called a grant and aid, and that was a full 4-year scholarship. We were required to keep our grades high, or at least above a C average, in order to keep our scholarship. Today, I believe, and I'm not totally familiar, but I think it's a little different, because I think you receive your scholarship annually, and it's it's re-given, and I think they break up scholarship money, amongst certain players. Like, again, I had a full 4-year scholarship. That does exist, but I think they are allowed to break up that money, that scholarship money, with individuals. I think it's imperative that the universities compel kids to graduate. And one of my schemes that I thought of, they were talking about paying players for their skills and their wares. And I didn't have any problems with that. But I was thinking I would pay the player after the player graduated. So if in fact you played football, for example, like I did, and you would get, some type of grant and aid, and you might get a couple of dollars. I used to have with all NCAA players in 1969, late 60s, they received what they call a laundry fund. And that was $15 a month. And boy, we waited for that $15 a month. So everybody got a $15 check all over the country that was in the NCAA. But so you're going to get some type of laundry fund to just exist. But if you're going to give some type of compensation, make it annual, let it just build. And once you graduate, you receive the money, and that money's receiving interest. I know Chris likes that, in terms of Edward Jones stuff, but nevertheless, once you graduate, you receive that income. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but you got to earn your way. So that's just one of my, one of my ideas.
Very interesting. Do we have any other questions? What do they say? No question is a stupid question, because somebody else probably has the same question. So Clarence, while we're waiting for more questions.
We have 5 minutes. We have 5 more minutes.
Yeah, we've got plenty of time for questions. So what do you see as what's going to happen in the future? What's the next big controversy, or the next big hurdle we need to overcome on this issue?
Well, one thing that I see that's constant and consistent and continuous, as I mentioned, are these confrontations at predominantly white universities with Black athletes and Black coaches. I mean, Black athletes and white coaches, I'm sorry. And it's continuous, and it seems to be a pattern within the fiber of our country. So I think that has to be addressed, but how do you address it? Of course, it's going to be addressed by university standards, but I think it also should be addressed by alumni standards and alumni giving. But you got to get to that point. We in my confrontation in 1969, we had two investigations. One was done by the New York State Human Rights Commission, and the other investigation was done by the Chancellor Corbally, who put together a committee to investigate our claims of racism within the athletic department. Within a few weeks, both of those studies were finished, and both of them addressed and exposed the racism within the departments, the athletic departments that we, were boycotting about. Nothing was done. And in retrospect, the chancellor was let go. So Ben Swartzwelder had more power, was making more money than the chancellor of the university, and his wishes were met, Ben Swartzwelder's, versus the chancellor's wishes. So, it's a difficult thing. It's a political thing, and it's a school thing. But the bottom line is, we have to find out who's writing the check and how powerful that check writer is in terms of making changes within their university environment.
It's like the boycotts you mentioned, Clarence. It all goes back to money. Money talks. When I was at the Air Force Academy, the football coach was the highest paid civilian in the DOD.
Right. So, but like I mentioned, the 2015 boycott at the University of Missouri, it was a little different because the football team and the coaches supported the boycott. They supported the Black players. They supported the university. So, and that is a real asset and a real fortunate thing to witness that that all those groups of people at the University of Missouri supported the Black players.
That leads us to our last question, which is, we have two more questions. Okay. Did you receive any support from your fellow white players at Syracuse?
Yeah, and when we boycotted the team, Ben Swartzwelder, well, first of all, Jim Brown came to our boycott to try to support us because he also was a player under Ben Swartzwelder in the earlier days before me. So Jim Brown tried to talk to the white players and tried to talk to the coaching staff to reconcile and mediate. Well, that didn't work. But I love Jim Brown because Jim Brown really showed his courage and his leadership. And we were with him for about a week, and we had a pretty good time in terms of just getting to know Jim Brown. But nevertheless, his mediation didn't work. So the 65 to 70 white ball players signed a petition that they wouldn't, in general, that they wouldn't play with us because of the stand that we had taken. Now, later, and you can look this up on YouTube, with a gentleman named Joe Ehrman, who was really the protagonist of the white players against us. He went on and played for the Baltimore Colts, I think 15 years for the Baltimore Colts. And he has openly and said that he apologized for what he felt was his wrongdoings at that time. And it's nice. We reconciled, and I think we forgave him, I believe, as a group. But I think he's one of the few old players that we were that were teammates, that we were all teammates, that came back and said that he was wrong. And he also said if he had to do it again, he would join us. So, that was refreshing. But as I mentioned, in all those eras, with all those great athletes, they all sacrificed. Like myself, I sacrificed in the Syracuse 9. We sacrificed our athletic careers if we would have one. You never know, but the opportunities were lost. And Jim Brown told us the night before he left, he said, you guys are really risking your future in the NFL. He said, I'm going to come back tomorrow and leave you here tonight to really discuss what you want to do. So we had a long discussion that night, crying and fighting and every emotion that you could think of. But in the morning, when Jim Brown came back, we said, we are going to follow through with this because we do not want anybody else to go through what we're going through. And so we feel that we were successful. We love Syracuse University, and we have a good relationship with Syracuse University right now. But that sacrifice is made by many African-American athletes, and they're not compensated, and sometimes they don't even receive a thank you and an apology like we did, an official apology from the university saying we were wrong. I mean, at least that's something. Not much, but at least it's something.
Well, thank you so much, Clarence. Well, we know lunchtime is over for many of you, but I hope that you will join us again for the next event on Tuesday, the 25th. There will be one at 6 and one at 7:30, both dealing with children and economic empowerment, and children's voices need to be heard. So Clarence, do you have a quick summation you'd like to offer?
No, I want to thank everybody for coming. I see some old friends there and some new folks, and hopefully we can get some movement in a positive direction in regards to this systemic stuff that we're dealing with today. So thank you very much to all of you. And
Clarence, I want to say thank you to you for everything you've done and sacrificed through the years and everything you still do to make the world a better place. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Now,
Yeah.
now Chris and Jerry, give me the money you owe me, but nevertheless.
Yeah, you're gonna have to accept the compliment.
Yeah, right. All right, gang, I'm gone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
That was good.
Quite a story.
I was recorded at the end.
You were?
Yeah, I said that was good.
Oh, yeah, your mic was still.
So I had one more question. Did
Oh.
they leave?
Did they leave the university? No, I think they stayed and graduated, I
They
believe.
did. Yeah, they
Oh.
did. They did.
Yeah, and there's several other, at least a couple other YouTube videos about it. There's a much longer one about it as well. And there's I believe there's a recording of discussion that was had with some of the other members of the Syracuse 8 about the situation on YouTube as well.
Mhm.
So I want to thank everybody from, it's just you and me, Julie, but thank you for coming. Thank you.
Well, everybody,
had
sometimes
a-
they just finish.
We
You know,
had a
it
good
really,
representation from coming to the table.
yeah, it really was interesting. And I'm always sorry that these are so short because, there's so many